slash. A cool thing you can do against someone trying to cut you is called boar's tusk. Looking deceptively off guard, he's actually ready immediately when his opponent strikes. And then, more advanced techniques you can perform against people are using cut thrusts, called sword chow. Counter after counter, move after move, you can see that two opponents locked in blade play are back and forth all the time. When you are fighting someone in armor, you don't really have an option with a sword. You can't break their armor, and you can't cut it either. So what do when all you have is a single sword? Well, you grab the blade itself, and use it to take on your opponent at close ranges. As you can see, they have leverage and control, and can fight the other guy well. Next is the only technique we won't practice in training, where you grab the blade in both hands and simply swing it like a club. This is Morkschlag, or English, murder stroke. You can probably guess why. It's great against armor, including training gear. Crazy, I think I'm out. A short demo before we go to the next weapon of what it's like. All right, gentlemen, we'll be moving on to our next weapon now, saber. Bring it up.
Wait, testing. What's good? I'm Andrew. I'm the president. I also teach saber.
Hello, I'm David. I'm an officer for the club, and I just help out with saber.
Next, we have saber. All sorts of these single-handed swords, curved or not, have appeared throughout history and cultures and movies and games. Our context is Europe and the modern era. Think Napoleonic, American Revolutionary War, Civil War, and after. Unlike many other swords, these are almost always used in a purely military context, hence military saber, instead of duels, civilians, or backup. Though some, like the Polish saber, as demonstrated here, would see such use as well. Used as a backup weapon to muskets and bayonets, and a primary armament on horseback. Our two saber demonstrators again are Andrew and David. They'll be showing The Art of British Military Saber, as written by Charles Roworth in 1798. They will demonstrate the Angelo Solo drill, which demonstrates strikes and guards taught in the system.
Guard! Cut to the head. St. George's. Cut to the right cheek. Outside guard. Cut to the left cheek. Inside guard. Cut to the right side. Outside half hanger. Cut to the inside. Inside half hanger. Cut to the wrist. Half circle. Cut to the leg. Shift. Slow swords.
As you can see, an excellent demonstration by David. Next, they will demonstrate lesson 9 of the 10 lessons by Mr. John Taylor. These lessons encapsulate a typical or possible exchange of blows in our system, which is strike-oriented and sequential to avoid double hits. Because this is unlike a sport. You don't want to hit your opponent while getting hit yourself. Outside guard, feint inside and cut outside, guard at head. Cut at wrist, parry cart, cut at head, guard your own. Thrust a cone, guard your head. Thrust a cone, guard your head, cut at head. Again. Now as our two sabers quickly gear up, you will see free sparring. This is the real deal. Full gear, nothing off limits, and as close as you can to simulating an actual fight with swords, as much as that's ever present. As you can see, historical fencing is purely a combat art. It is not a sport in the manner of speaking. What we practice and what we do is entirely in terms of, the art of fighting, so to speak, rather than the art of scoring a point. While of course we are safely geared up in training gear and no one's really going to fight with swords in a sharp sense, we are fighting in the sense of really going for it, so to speak. In that sense, it is both part historical and also part modern, because as much as you're studying an old historical text, it's also the most relevant thing on fighting with a sword, such as that can be relevant. Last engagement. And that is Andrew and David, our sabers for today.
I'm Diane, and I'm also an officer of this club. I teach rapier, which is the third weapon that we focus on. Now, you might notice that the rapier looks quite different from the previous two weapons you've looked at, and that's because it is primarily a thrusting weapon, which means instead of the slashes characteristic of saber and longsword, we primarily attack with forward thrusting motions, which are meant to pierce through holes in armor if necessary. The rapier is primarily a civilian weapon in the 17th century, and it is actually the most direct precursor for the modern fencing weapons foil and ebony, which explains why a lot of the movement and a lot of the attacking you see is pretty analogous to what you might see in the Olympics if you're watching fencing. Now, another feature that distinguishes the rapier from saber and longsword is that movement is primarily linear. You saw Alan and Truman and David and Andrew all circling around as they fought. However, rapier is fought in with primarily linear movements. So you have advances and retreats as you would in modern fencing. Now, also, unlike longsword and saber, there are not very many named sequences of guards and attacks as they demonstrated. Rather, we focus more on being able to manage measure, that is distance from your opponent, and also distance of attack on the spot while you're fighting. Therefore, it is a very technical weapon, and it relies a lot on dexterity. Contrary to popular belief, the rapier is not necessarily a light weapon. It's quite heavy, and being able to maneuver the tip of the weapon around your opponents with just your wrist and your forearm takes a lot of skill and a lot of strength. Now, in rapier, there's six primary parries, each meant to block off a different part of your body from your opponent. First of all, we have the parry 1, which is meant to block a blow to your head. You can envision this as drawing a sword from a scabbard and raising it above your head. This guards you off from any hits to the head, as shown here. Next, we have the parry 2, which defends your outer line. So if you have an opponent going to attack your shoulder or the outer side of your body, you're safe like this. Parry 3 is just a different name for the en garde. This is also a stance you might have seen a lot in modern fencing. So it neither protects your inner line nor your outer line, but it's a good way to access any other guards, and it's a good default stance. Now we have the parry 4, which protects your inner line. This is also just a simple movement over from the side. You can think of it as the opposite of the parry 2. Now, parry 5 and 6 both defend the lower inner line, that is towards your abdomen, but in 2 different ways. The parry 5 involves an inversion of your wrist like this, which means you're kind of twisted sideways to block off a blow towards your lower body. Now, this is not technically very reliable as you're locking your elbow into a very strange and unnatural position, but if you have a weapon in your other hand, like this parrying dagger I have here, you can effectively use it to block off your upper body as you have your opponent's weapon locked in a lower guard like this. See, as you can see, if I were not holding this microphone, I would be able to attack with this dagger, which makes the parry 5 viable. Now, a more reliable way to block off your lower inner line when you don't have another weapon in your offhand is the parry 6. This is an analogous motion, but instead of doing an inversion of my wrist here, I'm just pushing down and blocking off my opponent. This can also be done with 2 hands if I want a little more force in the guard. Now, like I mentioned earlier, the primary mode of attacking in rapier is just a simple extension. This can be done with a lunge, or if I'm too close to my opponent to be able to lunge and attack reliably without putting myself in danger, I can do a simple extension or a simple advance and extension. Now, one of the things everything I showed you looks pretty familiar to any of you who might be familiar with modern fencing. However, there are a lot of technical aspects that would honestly get you disqualified from any modern fencing competition, and that includes passing steps and maneuvers you can do with your offhand. Passing steps aren't super common in rapier, but they are allowed, and they are a good way to access certain positions and to bring your offhand forward in case you want to do anything with a dagger or cloak, or even just your bare hand. And yes, blocking your opponent's blade with your bare hand, or grabbing their blade out of the way to go in for an attack is technically viable. So as you can see, all 3 weapons that we practice here are very different, and require a lot of different technical skills, but they're all interesting in their own ways, and we encourage you to join and see for yourself, which one suits you the best, and just, how all of them are different. And with that, thank you.
Well, everyone, I know it's a bit short, but we are historical fencing. All in all, if you want to learn how to fight with swords, and I mean really fight with swords, come join our club. We're right across the way. We got a big pole axe for people to hold. And this has been our presentation. We've grown a lot from absolutely nothing this past year, and I hope more people can join us in the future.
Thank you very much.